Operation Wonder Weapon, Book 1, Chapter 4. John's U.S. records. Writer's oak table was buried in books, folios of French chansons, brittle Latin glossaries, hand-copied bestiaries, candles guttered in brass holders, dripping wax across half-finished diagrams. Writer bent over a medieval woodcut, finger tracing the stylized form of a dragon pierced through the breast. Staff members and aides flipped through tomes and scrolls.
"Note the heraldic flourish,"
he murmured, voice low but cutting through the scratch of pens.
"The dragon slain, yes, but no corpse, only transfigured. The law never records a body."
He tapped the margin.
"Where there is no body, there is always a transformation."
An aide slipped in, the door whispering shut behind him. He carried a telegram sheath. Writer didn't look up.
"From Rome?"
The aide hesitated.
"From New York, sir. Our contact make progress."
That drew Writer's eyes at last. He took the sheath, unfolded it, scanning the shorthand. The words were crisp, unadorned. Contacted subject's wife under guise of university survey. She confirms. Husband John J. Zimmerman. Born Italy. Emigrated after Great War. Engineer by training. Married with 8 children. Devout. Disciplined. Seldom speaks of past. Still bears scars of white war. Writer read it twice, then folded the sheet with delicate precision.
8 children,
he said softly.
How industrious.
His gaze drifted to the dragon woodcut, the sword piercing its breast.
The mannequin built a brood.
He set the telegram atop the stack of grimoires as if it belonged to the same mythology. His tone never shifted, but his eyes lingered on the neat rows of type a fraction too long. The mystery wasn't in America. It was in Italy. Did the wooden man emigrate to escape his past or to run toward his future?
Continue with the chanson de guest sources.
Rolling his sleeves higher.
A being imbued with as much power as John Zimmerman had to be important.
Back to bridges. In Italy, the engineering corps company yard erupted when they saw him. Shouts, boots pounding, hands grabbing shoulders.
"Who's that in the mask? Is that John? Johnny!
He's alive! Captain Gramps!
Zimmerman, you geezer!"
John stood straighter and raised a hand in greeting. His squad flanked him protectively, but the tide of engineers swept them in with backslaps and cheers. Nick, Ray, and Larry were hailed as heroes.
They were wary of John's mask, but knew his outline by heart.
Then Sergeant Blake, broad, ruddy, always the first to break orders, stepped forward.
"To heck with Ellison,"
he said, and wrapped John in a crushing hug. John couldn't get away in time. For a second, it was all warmth and laughter. Then Blake felt it. Not flesh, not even the wiry hardness of a lean soldier, but something solid. Dead solid. Cadaver stiff under wool. The hug ended too soon. Blake stepped back, resisting the urge to recoil, his grin warping into a strained grimace. He gave John's shoulder a hearty slap that stung his own hand.
"Good to have you back, Cap,"
he said, voice faltering. He sensed his mistake, but didn't know what to make of it. John regarded him through the goggles.
"Good to be back,"
he managed. Then, stentorian.
"Company, forward!"
The chatter died. Men snapped into line, boots scraping, shoulders straight. Once silence fell, broken only by the distant boom and clatter of battle, John let his mask turn slowly down the row.
I want to address this company about my recent misadventure.
he said evenly.
After our reconnaissance in the Naples Museum, we were tracked down. I was captured and taken to an SS stronghold, subject to a scientific test that left my appearance altered.
Side glances darted among the ranks.
Though I am fit to perform my duties, Command and I agreed my appearance should be kept private, so it does not distract from the work at hand. We do not yet know if this condition is permanent. I am hopeful in due time I may recover, but until then, this will be my uniform.
He tapped his mask and gloves.
If you have concerns, bring them directly to Major Ellison or to me.
Blake shifted uneasily.
Now, there is a more important matter.
John's voice grew firmer.
I want to acknowledge the initiative and bravery of Lieutenant Lawrence Morris Adams, Private Ray Chambord, and Private Nicholas Lars. Were it not for them, I'd still be abandoned and strapped to a chair in Castel de Monte. I also acknowledge the risk Major Ellison took in granting them leave to attempt a rescue. Without him, these men might well have been court-martialed for their act of mercy.
He laid a gloved hand over his chest. His painted eyes blinked gently behind the mask.
You have my deepest gratitude, boys. I could not be more honored to be the captain of such brave soldiers and such good friends.
A ripple of silence moved through the line, heavy and reverent.
That is all. We have work to do, men. Let's send these Jerrys back to the pit they came from. Dismissed.
The men broke ranks and resumed work. The bridge at the far end of town had been shelled again. Convoys were backing up, tanks stranded, infantry slogging through river muck. Bailey truss panels clanged as they were unloaded from the trucks, the cold steel biting through wool gloves. John and his squad worked shoulder to shoulder, sweat streaking the men's faces. John bent for the end of a panel. It came up light in his grip, almost effortless, while the private beside him grunted and strained. John felt no sweat, no burning muscles, only the strange, steady rhythm of wood that never tired. It unsettled him. The bridge rose bay by bay, steel over water, until at last the final panel was pinned into place. A tank growled forward, tracks clattering onto fresh steel. When it reached the far side, the engineers let out ragged cheers. Convoys began to crawl across, trucks and half-tracks finally surging toward the front. That was when the sun flashed. A shape screamed out of the glare. An FW-190 plunging low, cannon fire hammering the riverbank. Fountains of mud exploding around the men. Engineers dove for cover, scattering across the embankment. With a predatory swoop, the fighter released its bomb. A heartbeat later, a tearing explosion ripped through the convoy. Trucks shattered, fuel sprayed in fiery arcs. Men were flung into the muddy river. The center span of the bridge buckled, collapsed in a shriek of steel, dragging vehicles down with it.
How are they doing that?
Someone screamed over the roar, voice ragged with disbelief. The Germans seemed to know their every move. Chaos consumed the crossing, wounded dragged from twisted wreckage, soldiers scrambling to cut men free from the rising water, the stink of fuel spreading across the current. Above them, the FW-190 pulled up sharply, banking into the sun, gone as suddenly as it had come. Smoke still drifted off the river where the bomb had torn through the convoy. Men shouted over the roar of burning fuel as they dragged the wounded clear. A medic splashed through knee-deep water, cursing as he tried to keep his kit dry. John's mask faced up the road, eyes tracking the stalled column. If the armor couldn't cross, the whole push north froze. He snapped his hand down, sharp and commanding.
Engineers, on me! Salvage what we can! We build again, now!
Voice muffled, but loud enough. They obeyed. No hesitation. The Baileys were short, half the panels twisted or sunk, decking burned, a supply truck nothing but blackened steel, Nick bent double hauling a transom with 2 men, breath ragged, his legs still raw from days of running across Italy. Ray limped through mud with a box of bolts. Larry's hands shook as he tightened connections. Palms blistered. They were spent. But John was tireless. He shouldered wrecked panels from the water like they were driftwood. He hefted supply crates solo that normally took 4 men. When a beam jammed in the mud, he wrenched it free with a grunt, setting it with precision. His voice cut through the chaos, sharp, relentless.
Nick, 2 more men with you. Double brace that joint. Ray, get those bulks distributed. 1 box per bay. Larry, I want a diagonal truss up before we drop decking. Go!
The men obeyed without thinking, their captain's rhythm pulling them forward. Steel rose from the river again, improvised with scavenged parts and local timber. Larry scrounged from the riverbank. The bridge was ugly, patched, half the span, nothing like the manuals prescribed. But when the first tank crept forward and the decking held, the engineers roared their approval. John only gave a single nod, mask betraying nothing.
Good work. Now get the rest of the column across.
The men slumped on their haunches, mud-streaked and hollow-eyed. John still stood tall on the bridge, shoulders square, as if carved from the same steel they had just raised. Sergeant Blake panted heavily, staring at John wide-eyed.
Whatever they put in him, I want some.
Later, they built another bridge. Panels clanged into place, bolts hammered home, timber braces in the mud. By dusk, the convoy crept across, steel tracks rattling on new decking. The men dared a cheer. Then the whine of engines overhead, and another bomb shattered the span in a geyser of water and twisted steel. They cleared a roadblock the next day, dynamite blasting rock from a mountain pass. Engineers wiped dust from their faces, dragging debris aside so trucks could inch forward. Minutes later, German shells bracketed the cut with uncanny accuracy, turning the road into a death trap of craters and fire. They pushed the convoy on. Half-tracks and Shermans wound through valleys, infantry trucks grinding their gears. From nowhere came the crack of Mausers, MG fire stitching the lead vehicles, grenades bursting in the ditches. Another ambush, sprung as if the enemy had been waiting all along. By the time they staggered into the next staging area, HQ was in uproar. Officers snapped at each other over maps. Every runner eyed like a traitor. Every local farmer driven off at gunpoint. Radios were double-checked, codebooks reissued. The Germans had become impossibly perceptive. Cool dits. Orders came down sharp. Dig in. So, they dug. Shovels rang against the stony soil. Men panting as they cut foxholes along the terraces. Sandbags piled up into squat walls around the road. Machine guns perched to cover the bends. The farmhouse became a makeshift command post. Maps spread across a broken table, field phones buzzing in the corner. John worked among them, directing fields of fire, hauling sandbags 5 at a time. His men slogged, mud-caked and hollow-eyed, their feet raw from weeks of forced marches. Every blow of a shovel seemed heavier, every breath came ragged. From the command post came whispers. The leaks went deep, maybe even to Allied staff. Locals were interrogated and sent away under guard. Every runner, every courier was a suspect. The word spy was spat like a curse, but no answers came. Night fell with the smell of dust and lamp smoke. The engineers sat hunched in their foxholes among the olive trees, rifles across their knees, staring into a darkness that felt far too knowing. In the distance, anti-aircraft guns boomed as the Germans bombed their front lines with too much accuracy. In a tired lull, a soldier broke the silence.
How many gears are on an Italian tank?
How many?
4. 1 forward, 3 in reverse.
Laughter. John spoke up on cue.
You boys performed admirably. I know this has been one of the roughest and most frustrating things we've done, but you made everyone proud.
John encouraged them, not a hint of exhaustion.
Not as rough as the induction paperwork.
Tommy joked. Nick muttered into his sleeve.
Feels like they'd see us before we move.
Ray wiped sweat from his brow.
Don't need a spyglass to know we're screwed.
He readorned the elusive boot. John had found it stuck in the mud earlier.
Larry said nothing, brow furrowed, as he squinted at the thalamic resonance notes he'd copied from the papers he'd scavenged from Castel del Monte.
A battered German language guide lay propped open beside him, pages bristling with dog ears and pencil marks. He mouthed words under his breath, pencil scratching halting translations in the margins.
Well,
he sighed.
Half of it is nonsense, or too advanced for me.
John leaned over his shoulder, goggles reflecting faintly in the lamplight.
That one means oscillation,
he said, pointing.
I think.
Larry gave him a look.
You're guessing?
John cracked a thin smile beneath the mask.
So are you.
They both stared at the page, diagrams of jagged waves and unfamiliar symbols. The hillside went still for a long moment. Then, faint but certain, came the flutter of wings. A pigeon dropped onto the terrace wall, feathers ragged from long flight, head cocked as it studied the men. No one paid it any mind as it strutted along the stones, until it fluttered up and landed squarely on John's helmet. It bobbed eagerly, pattering in tight circles, cooing loud and insistent. The engineers started to chuckle. John shoved it off.
Go away.
The pigeon flapped, recovered, and plopped right back on his head.
Cuckoo! Cuckoo! Cuckoo-dits! Cuckoo-dits!
John froze.
Well, that's a first.
Sammy muttered around his cigarette. The bird fluttered back to the wall, puffed its chest, and did a ridiculous little strut, tail flicking.
Cuckoo-dits! Cuckoo-dits!
A couple of the men laughed uneasily. Tommy snorted.
Look at that dance. Must be a French pigeon.
But John's gaze became riveted. He'd seen strange things in his lifetime. His mask tilted toward the bird.
Could be a lost carrier.
Cuckoo-dits! Cuckoo-dits!
He leaned forward.
Am I crazy, or am I hearing an actual word?
We don't speak bird, Cap.
One of the privates called.
It sounds like colditz, which means cold place.
Sammy blew a cloud of smoke.
Yep, definitely crazy.
John raised a gloved hand toward the bird. The pigeon pirouetted once, then hopped aboard, tiny claws gripping his palm.
Aw, look at that. Mascot material.
Ray chuckled. John straightened.
Colditz?
He asked. The pigeon went rigid, head tilting, eyes locked.
Colditz?
John repeated. The bird gave one final bob, then launched skyward, wings beating hard until it vanished into the olive trees. The men blinked after it in silence.
Well,
Ray finally said, exhaling,
that was unique. Maybe you ought to be a pigeoneer too, Cap.
They sat in the dark a while longer, the only sound the drip of water down the terraces. Someone finally whispered,
Hey, Blake, back when the Cap came back, you looked spooked. Why?
Blake froze with his cigarette halfway to his lips. He flicked ash, buying time. Then he exhaled.
It didn't feel like flesh.
He said at last, low so John couldn't hear.
Hard, cold, no give. You touch him and it's like a corpse.
The men shifted uneasily. Blake jabbed his cigarette into the dirt, voice tightening.
Look, I'm not saying I don't trust him. He's our captain, always will be. But you've seen it. He doesn't tire, he doesn't sweat, he lifts what takes 4 of us. And now...
He gestured vaguely toward the night sky where the pigeon had gone.
Now he's talking to birds. Maybe the Jerry's turned him into a zombie.
Silence. Someone gave a short, nervous laugh, but no one joined in. The men exchanged looks in the half-light, the seed of a thought none of them wanted to say aloud, taking root. The captain was changed. Ryder and the mirrors. The chamber was dim but alive with the soft clatter of typewriters and the scratch of clerks' pens. Aides perched at their stations like crows, recording every word. 2 SS officers stood stiff-backed beside the mirrors, guardians of the Reich's most prized intelligence tools. No question was private, no answer unnoted. Dr. Klaus Ryder stepped forward, notebook under his arm, gray tunic pressed. His expression was neutral, as though he were about to catalog pottery shards rather than address powers older than empires. He inclined his head slightly.
Reichsführer has ordered me to continue inquire into the Drachenvieh stuff.
His voice was quiet, deliberate. He stepped before the massive wall mirror.
Mirror, mirror, where lies the staff of Maleficent the Dragonfey?
The glass rippled. The voice emerged, smooth, resonant, detached.
Where dragon fell, no bones were found, yet curse took root within the ground. A king of dreams built towers high, his castle pierced a haunted sky. Beneath the stones the shadow stays, in rags and ash the power lays. Seek the road where lives are lost. The staff still sleeps beneath the frost.
The seeing mirror clouded, then cleared. A vision sharpened. Alpine crags under snow. A pale fortress rising like a vision itself. Turrets, spires, half shrouded in mist. Below, the winding mountain road glistened with rain, marked by a wrecked opal blitz. Looted artifacts scattered across the road, a place of grandeur and misfortune. One of the officers leaned in, murmuring,
Neuschwanstein, Ludwig's Folly.
The scribes dutifully recorded the rhyme. Ryder's face remained calm, but his pale eyes caught the glow like glass. He waited for silence before continuing.
Second inquiry. Mirror, mirror, what source bestowed life upon the one called John Zimmerman?
The mask face swam on the surface, impassive, and the words rolled like a chant.
An old man carved a boy of pine, small and comely, a form divine. He longed for brood, his heart was sore, a bachelor lonely to his core. The wish was heard, the breath was sown. The puppet stirred, the string was thrown. The father gave the body's frame. The mother gave the living flame. 2 hands, 2 hearts, his making spun. The craftsman's child, blue fairy's son.
The clerk scribbled quickly, brows furrowed as if the language itself resisted sense. Only Ryder discerned the meaning. Blue fairy. The rhyme spoke of longing and affection, a lonely craftsman, a wish granted, a child brought to life, a quaint explanation, almost pastoral. Yet the energy he had witnessed at Castel del Monte had been anything but quaint. It had surged through stone and steel with a violence that defied measurement. It had torn through gauges designed to register artillery shock, and it had been spent on a boy. Ryder stood very still. Power of that magnitude was not deployed casually. Not by nature, not by accident. Even the Reich rationed its resources carefully. Yet here, an immense force had been invested in something small, domestic, almost sentimental. He lowered his gaze to his notebook and wrote the name again, slower this time. Blue Fairy. Something in the equation did not balance.
Continue the record search,
he said quietly.
Italy first. I want everything on Zimmerman.
The mirrors dimmed behind him, but the question lingered. Why so much? Ray talks to John. The men sprawled on sandbags and ammo crates, tins clattering open, the familiar bitter stink of coffee and bully beef in the air. Sunlight angled through the haze of dust and smoke. John sat slightly apart, mask and goggles hiding his face, struggling to pull a tab with his gloves. He opened his ration tin and stared at it a moment. Opening it had felt so natural, but he felt no hunger. He carried it over to a wiry private who hadn't drawn one.
Here, eat.
The man hesitated.
Cap.
John's tone allowed no refusal.
Eat.
The private nodded quickly and dug in with gusto. Down the trench, 2 engineers leaned close to Ray as he pried open his tin. One lowered his voice.
You saw him in the castle. What did they do to him?
Ray kept his head down.
Nothing you need worry about.
Another pressed.
Burned him with acid? Did they cut him up? Some kind of plastic surgery?
He lowered his voice even more.
Word is he's half dead, stiff as a corpse, shot up full of something that keeps him going. Is that why the brass say he'd be a distraction?
Ray's jaw tightened. He jabbed his fork into the tin.
Do you think before you speak?
He rose and trekked down the dugout toward John. John was bent over a notebook, broad shoulders hunched, his pencil scratching.
Dear Margaret, do you remember when I told you about that skin condition I had as a child and you said I was crazy and thought I was joking? Well, it's come back. It's been confirmed by the chief medical officer, 3 generals, a major, and 3 colleagues.
He stopped, then dragged hard lines through the words. The page tore. Ray cleared his throat.
Cap, you writing home?
John curled the page toward himself, voice flat, but not unkind.
Trying.
Ray hesitated, shifting his tin from one hand to the other.
You've got 6 kids, right?
John got a fresh page.
8.
Ray whistled softly.
8. Can't even picture it. I just had my ma, single mother. She worked nights while I scraped my way through college. Got good at math. Machines always made sense. People didn't.
He chuckled nervously, waiting. John finally lifted his head, goggles glinting.
That's more than most men can manage, Ray. Corps run on men like you.
He paused, then added softly.
Your mother must be proud.
Ray smiled faintly, but something in him wilted. He wanted a father's word, but all he got was a captain's. Behind them, the whispers still carried. The words freak and spy drifted like gnats in the hot air. John heard them. Ray heard them. Neither spoke of it. Ray cleared his throat.
So, your dad, what was he like? Is it okay if I ask?
John's pencil hovered a moment, then he set it down carefully on the notebook.
He was a woodworker, made toys and clocks.
His tone was flat, clipped. Ray waited.
Must have been a good dad raising you, teaching you stuff.
John's gloved hands folded over the paper.
He was. Very selfless, good with his hands.
That's kind of like you, huh? Runs in the family, engineering, carpentry, all that.
John's mask angled toward him.
Something like that.
His voice was steady, but too steady, stripped of warmth. Ray shifted, trying again.
Did he ever get to see your kids? His grandkids?
A pause. John's jaw flexed beneath the mask.
No.
One word. Final. Ray bit his lip.
I'm sorry, Cap. I didn't mean to.
John shook his head, cutting him off, voice quieter now.
It's fine. You couldn't know.
Silence stretched. The sounds of spoons scraping tins, boots shifting, the distant thunder of artillery filled the air. Ray pressed on anyway, softer, almost like a child testing boundaries.
What about your mom?
The mask tilted down, eyes hidden, but the tightness in his voice betrayed him.
There wasn't one. You know why.
Ray blinked.
Oh, so just your dad then?
John's gloved hands tightened on the notebook until the leather creaked.
Yes.
Something in the tone told Ray not to push further. He looked down at his half-eaten ration, appetite gone. John finally said, low and measured,
The past doesn't win wars, Ray. Best keep your mind forward.
He closed the notebook and slipped it into his coat.
Eat up. That's an order.
Ray gave a stiff little nod, but inside he felt the sting. Wellness check. Major Ellison's temporary office was a commandeered parlor, the windows blacked with sandbags, maps tacked to the walls, a kettle hissing softly on a camp stove. The muffled thrum of artillery rolled in from the distance.
Come in, John.
Ellison stood and gestured John toward the opposite chair. His tone was steady. John stepped inside, saluted, and shut the door, and sat. Ellison returned the salute and resumed his seat. He glanced at John as he checked the kettle.
You can take off the mask if you like. We're friends here.
For the first time in days, John tugged the straps free from his head. The mask came away. His hair was disheveled, dust where the edges of the mask and goggles overlapped. John wiped his face on his sleeve and removed his gloves. He tried to tame his black and gray hair. It straggled over his forehead. Ellison watched without flinching.
Chamomile tea?
Ellison poured tea into a dented mug and slid it across. John regarded it with an edge of remorse.
I don't really need to drink.
His hands stayed clenched in his lap. Ellison shrugged.
I figured, but it feels rude not to offer something.
John looked up.
Any word from command on the one threat?
Ellison shook his head.
Nothing. I don't know whether that means there simply isn't anything to report, or if they didn't take it seriously. Nazis running around with a magic wand is a lot to swallow.
He changed the subject.
How are you holding up?
His face was earnest and filled with curiosity. Head cocked, studying the animated face. John sat, folding the mask in his lap.
I hear them, sir. Behind my back. Freak, spy, zombie. They don't say it to my face, but I hear it.
They're scared. The Germans have an edge on us, and we don't know where it's coming from. The boys are seeing danger in everyone now. Your differences just make you an obvious target.
John stared at the floor.
Different doesn't begin to cover it. They're scared of me, and maybe they should be.
Ellison studied him a moment, then leaned forward.
What threat could you possibly pose to them?
John scoffed.
I can break bone without trying. I'm stronger than I ought to be. The mask is as much distraction as my face would be. Suspicion and distrust are spreading. I'm a liability. I'm a danger to my own men.
The last words hung in the air. He wasn't really a threat. However, the lie struck him like a misstep on a staircase. When he realized what he'd done, his breath stuttered, his shoulders lifted instinctively, bracing. Not here, not in front of Ellison. He could already imagine it, the creeping stretch, the shameful extension, Wood betraying him in full view of his commanding officer. Major Ellison blinked.
Are you okay?
John squeezed his eyes shut. He waited for the pressure, for the slow, inevitable swell, for the humiliation. His joints rattled faintly as he held himself rigid. 1 second, 2, 3. Nothing. The silence pressed harder than the lie. He opened one eye. Very carefully, he lifted a finger to the bridge of his nose, smooth, unchanged. He swallowed.
I'm a peak elephant.
He muttered. Ellison stared.
What?
John let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh. Relief came first, then something else. The correction had always come, even when he wished it wouldn't. He lowered his hand slowly.
Well, that's new.
But his pulse did not settle. The absence lingered. What? Ellison blanched.
What are you doing?
Ellison stared incredulous. John sagged into the chair and closed his eyes, embarrassed and relieved.
Something I grew out of. An old complication, I guess.
He waved dismissively. Ellison scowled in confusion.
I'll take your word for it.
John sat up again, composing himself.
I guess what I mean is, getting in a fistfight with me would be like pitting an unarmed man against a guy wielding a 2x4. If I'm provoked, I'm afraid I'll kill someone without meaning to.
Ellison smirked fully now.
I would pay money to see you in a fistfight, and I'd make a killing if I were a betting man. No pun intended.
John finally chuckled. He picked up the tin and took a sip without thinking. He wondered where the tea would go. His head, neck, and torso were separate pieces of wood. As a child, he just had to accept it. As an adult, it hurt to think about. He took another experimental sip. The sweetened herbal tea passed into him without a trace. He felt it warm his chest. It made no sense. Silence stretched, broken only by the kettle's hiss. John shifted, then asked, almost cautiously,
Sir, what is Colditz?
Ellison tilted his head.
Colditz Castle, maximum security POW prison in Saxony. Escaper's nightmare. Castle walls, steep slopes, double guards. They send the incorrigibles there. Men who keep trying to break out. Usually ends up being the best and brightest soldiers. Escape artists.
He paused.
Why do you ask?
John fingered his gloves a long moment, then said quietly,
A pigeon landed on me. Wouldn't leave. Kept cooing the word Colditz over and over.
Ellison's brows rose. He didn't laugh, didn't scoff. He just sat back, thinking.
A pigeon?
Yes, sir. I have witnesses.
I wasn't thinking you were crazy. We're past questioning weird things.
Another long pause. Then Ellison nodded once, as if filing it away.
Stranger things have happened in this war.
He raised his mug to John.
Let me know if it drops any more communiques.
John leaned back, tension easing just slightly. For the first time in days, he felt more at ease, accepted. Ellison regarded him with quiet seriousness.
You're a good man, a competent man. That takes precedence over appearances. Don't forget it. That's an order.
John nodded, eyes downcast. He set down the tin, then slipped the disguise back over his face.
Thank you, sir.
John left the parlor, hood, mask, goggles, helmet, and gloves back in place, his steps slow and deliberate down the narrow hall. The warmth of Ellison's words still lingered, but outside the door the air was colder, thinner. A private from another company leaned against the wall with a cigarette, waiting on some errand. He straightened when John emerged, gave a salute that faltered halfway. His eyes lingered too long on the mask, on the sound of boots that struck the floorboards a little too hard.
Captain?
The private said, voice careful, balancing between respect and unease. John returned the salute crisply, goggles reflecting the dim light.
Carry on.
The man nodded, but didn't move until John had passed. When John's back was turned, he exhaled smoke through his teeth and muttered, just to himself,
Zombie spy?
John heard it anyway, his teeth grinding under the mask. He kept walking. John's Records, Italy. The Reich Archive office smelled of leather bindings and stale ink. Ryder sat rigid behind his desk, the day's couriers stacked neatly to his right, a brass lamp burning low at his elbow. He had been coordinating shipment of equipment, organizing skilled archaeologists, and preparing for potential problems at the Dragon Phase resting place. He slit the seal on the newest sheath in his pile, its cover stamped with the Black Eagle of Rome's Intelligence Bureau. Inside, brittle carbon copies, handwritten notes, metal citations. He shifted in his seat and began to read. Giovanni Giuseppe Zimmerman, born 1896, Italian Alps. Completed 8 years of Alpine schooling, fluent in Italian, German, and local dialect. Received technical training in drafting and mechanics, with 1 year at the Innsbruck Polytechnic before mobilization in 1914. Regiment Alpini, 1915 to 1918. White War Service, Adamello and Ortler sectors. Severe frostbite, shrapnel wounds. Cited for conspicuous bravery under fire at Col di Lana, awarded the Gold Medal of Military Valor. Father Giuseppe died in a refugee camp, age 77. Ryder's mouth pressed into a thin line. He read further. Demobilized, 1919. Record cease. Presumed emigration to New York. No ecclesiastical obstacles noted, though parish register indicates irregularities at baptism. The doctor leaned back, eyes narrowing. So the wooden boy had not been sheltered or soft. He had fought in the most brutal theater of the last war, had bled and survived where thousands froze to death in caves and trenches of ice. And not merely survived, he had earned the kingdom's highest honor. Baptismal entries were normally immaculate things, dates, parents, godparents, and birth records aligned with clerical precision. John's, however, was a patchwork of mismatched dates and missing names, as though the parish had quietly invented the boy's paperwork after the fact. A child who appeared on the register without ever passing cleanly through civil record-keeping was, in Ryder's view, a family hiding a secret. Ryder set the folio beside the earlier packet from New York, and then he pulled out his own notebook where the mirror's riddle lay transcribed. The father gave the body's frame, the mother gave the living flame, the craftsman's child, blue fairy's son. He exhaled slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the folio. A wooden child, a war hero, a patriarch. Why would so much power go into a puppet just for him to live an ordinary life? Why would the blue one indulge an old man in such a way? The office door clicked. An aide appeared, heels snapping.
You rang, doctor?
Ryder tapped the map spread across his desk. The Alps, the ridges above San Ruggiero, a red circle around a small village.
This is where he was carved, where the stories begin. You will send someone there, quietly. Speak to the priest, the old man in the square, the widows by the fires. I want the tales of the Fata Blue recorded and brought to me.
The aide hesitated.
And if they refuse to speak?
Ryder's gaze lifted, flat and cold.
They will speak.
The aide swallowed, nodded, and withdrew. Alone again, Ryder looked once more at the metal citation, then at the mirror's verse. His hand drifted toward the dragon woodcut, tacked to his wall. A saint's sword, piercing through scaled flesh. He closed the folio with precise care, as if sealing away a specimen jar. Already his mind was in the mountains, climbing toward the village, toward the place where wood and wonder had once met.